for the next nearly a week is a seminar on the subject of psychology. But this is, of course, psychology from the Vaishnava Vedanta point of view. And what I will be presenting you, we can say in those terms, is scientific. Of course, honestly speaking, psychology itself is sort of a borderline science. The scientists of the harder science, like sciences like physics or chemistry, might not even like that psychology is called a science. Because the mind is, of course, not something that we can put under a microscope. Not something that we can so easily test as we can test something that is grossly physical. But obviously, it is well understood, both in the West and in the East, that there is such a thing as a mind. And that the mind has healthy state and also unhealthy state. So, in terms of what we as members of the Hare Krishna movement, coming in the line of Srila Prabhupada, what we understand to be spiritual science, I'm going to be speaking about the mind. I'm going to be referring to scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and others. And I'm going to be going into some detail about what the mind is, how it works, its problems, and how the mind can be cured of these problems. Now, I've been working on this subject matter since last spring, and I have a website, as I think many of you know, and I've been publishing the results of that work sort of in irregular series. And I recently came to the kind of like realization that my work in this area, as far as writing and researching, I've decided that it's finished. Although the subject matter of psychology in terms of the Vaishnava outlook on Vedanta, that subject is vast. In fact, there's one way that you could say that our scriptures are only about psychology. In fact, one very well-known transactional psychologist, this is a particular school of psychology. This gentleman actually met Srila Prabhupada in the 1970s. He even made the comment that the Bhagavad Gita is a psychology textbook. So, and that's valid. That's valid. If you take the Greek word psyche, from which we get psychology, psyche means soul. So certainly Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam is very much about the soul. And out of the soul comes the mind. This is our understanding. And this is pretty much the Western understanding also. The soul is the root of life. And the mind is the functions of the mind are sort of the subtle symptoms of life. So, why did I conclude that my work has come to an end? Well, I approached this subject although of course, as I said, it's all being drawn from Vedic sources, but I think my approach was rather Western and analytical. And that's useful up to a point. So what you'll be getting in the 5 or 6 days of this seminar is a sort of, diagrammatic explanation, which is typically Western. It's also there in Vedic tradition too. But ultimately our philosophy is personal. And this diagrammatic analytical approach tends to be impersonal. Break things down into parts, mechanical, see how everything fits together. But if you do that, You can add up all the parts, but that doesn't really add up to a person as we experience ourselves in a person. A person is always more than the sum of whatever parts are considered to be to make up that person. And we all know this, you see. In fact, psychology, as known in the West, it tends to go into the mind and break things up and analyze things. Oh, you're doing this because of that, you're doing this because of that. And still it seems to fall short of really meaningful explanation of who we are and what we are doing and why we are doing it. Because it does tend to be too analytical. A person is more than that. So this is when I said I'm making an introduction to the introduction. This is what I wanted to explain. This seminar is only going so far because I think this is as far as you can validly go from this analytical approach. And if you want to know more, then one should just go directly into the Vedic scriptures themselves and read them. Because as soon as you start to read, and I'll mention 3 scriptures in particular, which I think would be very helpful for further study of what we're calling Vedic psychology. So first of all would be the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata is dealing quite a bit with what we would call the more conditioned psychology. Perhaps ordinary psychology, not. There are many narratives in the Mahabharata, but certainly many of them are about persons with problems. See, of course, these problems are it's all presented from the Vedic point of view, the analysis of problems, how people get problems in their life. But Mahabharata is very much about that. And less about what we might call transcendental psychology, the psychology of persons who are on a higher plane than ordinary people. For that, then you would move up to Srimad Bhagavatam, and even more to the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Chaitanya Charitamrita, you're being presented with narratives or stories, so to speak, about persons who are actually established in transcendental ecstasy and love of God. And here you're seeing, we might call it an ideal psychology. A psychology that most people in this world, are not up to. Put it that way. But it is showing us a goal of very pure, very spiritual behavior. So these 3, Mahabharata, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, I would recommend you to read, to see this psychology in action. And that's very important. Because as I said, ultimately we are persons, and we have to understand things from a personal point of view. So the best way is to just go right into the leelas, right into the descriptions, the narratives, which are showing you how people behave. So here in this seminar, I'm not really doing that. As I said, this is more analytical, breaking things into parts. And this has its place in our philosophy. There's a technical word for it, Sankhya. Sankhya means to count, literally in Sanskrit. So it's giving the image of you have different parts and you're counting them and also seeing how they fit together. But as you know from Bhagavad Gita, philosophy, the Vedic philosophy does not end in the Sankhya. This is more of a beginning stage. It certainly does not end. In the West, there's a strong tendency in many circles to think that's where everything ends. When things are broken into their parts, you understand how the mechanism works together. End of inquiry, end of story. But the Vedic point of view does not agree with that conclusion. But I'm sure that you're going to find this, what I do have to present, quite
Olen varma, että
interesting and I hope helpful education.
tuntuu tämä esityksen hyvin mielenkiintoinen.
So now that was the introduction to the introduction. Now we'll start with the introduction. Now obviously, if we're speaking of psychology, this is the study of the mind.
Psykologia tarkoittaa mielen tutkimista.
Now, there has been a tendency in our movement in ISKCON to dismiss the mind.
Jättää mieli huomioon.
In fact, I've heard lectures to that effect.
Olen kuullut luentoja
persons who were leaders of our movement at that time.
Joskus aikaisemmin.
They used to say that the mind, the mental plane, is just illusion, and you can just jump over it. Why meddle with it? It just gets you entangled in uncertainties and hang-ups and all this thing. So just jump over it. But I think the experience of devotees has been that this is not so easy to do. And with good reason. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, we don't find Krishna dismissing the mind. Krishna has quite a lot to say about the mind. And the mind is just something we should crumple up like a used tissue paper and throw in the waste paper basket. Why is Krishna speaking so much about the mind? So, in the Gita, for example, he speaks of the 8 components of this material world, this world we're now experiencing. And one of them is the mind. Manas, there's the 5 what are called gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And then there's mind, and intelligence, and false ego. And these are the 3 components of what is known as the linga sharira, or the subtle body, or the astral body, if you want to use a Western term. So you see, Bhagavad Gita and all the Vedic scriptures are teaching us actually that we have 2 bodies. We have 2 bodies. We have the body that we see when we look in the mirror. This is called the Annamaya Purusha. It means, Anna means food. So this is the body that is nourished by food. As we eat, this body is able to exist and grow and be nourished. So this is, we can call the physical body or the gross body. So that everyone knows this body. But the Vedas are telling us we have another body. And Srila Prabhupada, he used to give a very apt analogy. He said it's just like the clothes you wear. You have your exterior clothing that everyone sees, and then you have your underclothes. In America, sometimes underclothes are called unmentionables. Things you don't talk about. Unmentionables. So everyone has the clothes that are visible and the clothes that are invisible, that doesn't get talked about, the underclothes. So Srila Prabhupada used this analogy. It's a very apt analogy. That we have the exterior physical body that everyone sees, but we have another body which is invisible to the sight of others, but is nonetheless there. And that's called the subtle body, Linga Sharira. And as I've mentioned, there are 3 parts to it, in a sense. But in another sense, these are 3 phases, one can say. 3 functions of the subtle body. There's the mind, there's the intellect, and the false ego. So just to give now, since this is an introduction, and I've introduced these terms, and you're probably curious what they mean and how to differentiate, I can give you an example that my spiritual master gave. He said, suppose you hear a tape recorder, or now they have CD players.
että teillä on kasettisoitin ja CD-soitin.
So you hear music being played by one of these devices.
Musiikki, joka tulee laittaa.
So then the first reaction,
Ensimmäinen,
you hear the music,
kuulla tuo musiikki.
and so you react to the music. That's generally the first
Reagoidaan siihen musiikkiin.
phase of our response,
Tämä on ensimmäinen.
that we react to the music. So there's some music. So according to our taste,
Miten
we categorize this music as it's nice music,
ajatellaan, että tuo on
or
joku hyvä musiikki.
I don't like this music.
Ja sitten en oikein pidä tästä musiikista.
So these are two functions in Sanskrit: sankalpa, vikalpa. Sankalpa means to accept.
Sankalpa tarkoittaa.
So when we think this music is nice,
Ajattelen, että tämä musiikki
I like it, I'd like to go on hearing it,
haluan kuunnella sitä.
then this is sankalpa, acceptance.
Tämä on
And vikalpa means rejection. And I don't like this.
Tarkoittaa hylkäämistä.
Turn it off, please, or
Sammuta.
like that. And so these are the basic functions of the mind.
Nämä ovat
And it's very much rooted in taste. When we use taste, we don't, this word taste, we don't just mean sensation of the tongue. But with all our senses, there is a taste, you see. We talk of people's taste in how they dress, how they act, how they speak. So that's all the province of the mind. And so based on our particular attitude, our particular taste, then we form these generalizations about things. There are things I like and things I don't like. Sankalpa, vikalpa. So that's generally our first reaction. And then after we've decided whether we like this music or not, then we become inquisitive. For instance, if we haven't heard this music before, then we'll ask, who is this? See, and whether you like it or not, you see. If you like it, then, oh, who's that? If you don't like it, who's that? You see? But either way, this is buddhi, this is intellect. Intellect wants to probe. What is the cause of this? Okay, this is something I like or don't like, but what's the cause? So this naturally follows buddhi, intellect. Another example I can give, just as I have this printed page before me. You see, the mind can react to this page without knowing what these words say. You see, if you're walking along and the wind blows the page, and just like me, I'm not from Finland, so I don't read Finnish. So if I'm walking along and a Finnish newspaper blows in my face, I don't need to be able to read the newspaper and, you know, remove it from my face to react that this is an annoyance, I don't like this. So to be able to read and understand what's written on a sheet of paper, this is a higher step. So this is intellect or buddhi. And so there's an example of, you know, you're very thirsty, and you're in a place that you're not very familiar with, but there's a refrigerator, so you can't help, no one's around, and you're very, very thirsty, so you open up the refrigerator, you look inside, and there's a bottle there, it looks like something nice to drink. That's what it looks like to your senses. And so the senses feed this information to the mind, and the mind is very disturbed by thirst. So the mind becomes immediately attached to that. Okay, you should take that bottle, open it up, and start to drink it. You see? So you reach for it, and you're just pulling the bottle toward yourself, but then you notice there's something written. There's a label. So then you look at that label, and it says poison. So this is the intellect. And then the intellect overrides the mind instantly. And the mind, although you're still thirsty, the mind agrees, okay, yeah, that's not good, put it back. Now, if you didn't know how to read this, again, it was, you know, in some strange language that you couldn't read, then you might follow your mind. This has happened. I remember visiting Malaysia years ago, and they have a lot of these plantations out in the forested areas. And you know, whole plantation is like a village. There's a village that comes with the plantation of workers who work in the village. And they're sometimes putting poison, weed poison and the insect poison for spraying the crops. They sometimes don't have a proper container, so they put this poison, which is a brown liquid, in a Coca-Cola bottle, and they keep that in the shed somewhere. And there have been quite a few cases of children going into the shed and seeing the bottle, and they think it's Coca-Cola, and they drink it, and they die. So there's been quite a few. I was made to know that there's quite a lot of tragedies. So a child's intelligence is not very developed. Mind is there functioning, but the intelligence is not very developed. So a child doesn't stop to think about that. But if we understand that this is poison, we won't drink it. And if we don't understand it, if we don't read the label, and we're very thirsty, we might drink it. So with these examples, you can start to understand the difference between mind and intellect. And then false ego, ahankara, is the identification, first of all, with the body. That I'm a soul, I'm a non-material being, but identifying with the body, I actually think that I am the body. And then there are possessions around us, things around us, which we consider a property of ourselves, meaning the body, you see. And so our false ego extends to those things. We say, this is mine. My spiritual master gave a very, very good analogy of traffic, cars driving on the street, and there's an accident. One car hits another, and the driver of the car that's been bashed jumps out and yells at the other driver, "You hit me." He wasn't hit. His car was hit. But he so much identifies with the car, and also is so outraged that this person would dare bump my car. So he's personalizing the car. You hit me. If you study language, you see it's full of these type of remarks. People are talking about something else, but they're putting in this personal pronoun I or me, meaning themselves, because of the false ego. So just like getting back to the analogy of music being played. So we think that we like the music, we inquire, what is this music? And someone says, oh, this is the latest CD by someone, some singer. And then the next thing we think is, oh, I should get one for myself. I should go to the CD shop, music shop, and buy one of these, so I can have them. So this is, you can follow these processes. So it's perhaps, rather than so much trying to understand this as three different realms of our subtle processes, rather just to think of them as three stages of natural development. But they're called mind, intelligence, and false ego. So now the mind. Psychology basically, now Vedic psychology actually means all these things, I should say. But of them, the mind stands out. The mind is still paramount. And of course in this seminar I'm going to be explaining just why that is. But today I'll mention that there's a purport by Srila Prabhupada to a verse spoken by Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto. It's actually not a purport, it's a footnote. There's a word in the verse mana, which means mind, and then Prabhupada puts an asterisk, a little star next to it, and then there's a footnote. And he's saying about this mind, let me have this quote somewhere, I could read it directly. Yeah, it should be here. Yes. I'll read it from here. Prabhupada, in his word-for-word translation, marked the word mana, mind with an asterisk, and in the footnote elaborates, the mind is always planning how to remain in the material world and struggle for existence. It is the chief part of the subtle body, which consists of mind, intelligence, and false ego. So the chief part of the subtle body, and as we go on in this seminar, we'll understand clearer why that is, because I'll give it away today, but we'll come back to this and elaborate very much. The mind is the storehouse of our desires. See, we all know we have desires. So where do they come from? They're coming out of, today I'll say the root of the mind, or Srila Prabhupada used this word subconscious. And there is we're going to be getting into the Vedic terminology of this later. I'm not going to go much into this today because this is just introduction. But just to let you know that the Vedas, which are of course scriptures thousands of years old, they have always recognized that there is a surface feature of the mind, subconscious, that which we know of. We do our thinking in that part. And then there's kind of like a basement to the mind, a subconscious. And all our desires are down there, down in the cellar. So in the West, this is generally considered to be, I've read quite a bit of Western psychology books. And generally people will say that this is what Freud contributed. Now Sigmund Freud lived a bit more than 100 years ago. So if this is true, if we can really say that the subconscious is a concept that has come into the West from the time of Sigmund Freud, then this is very, very recent. Whereas in the Vedas, this has been known for thousands of years. And there's terminology for it, and there's a very, very precise explanation for how the subconscious works in relationship with the conscious mind. We will be going into that. But anyway, in any case, the mind, of these three subtle functions, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, the mind is most important for the fact that this is where desires originate. The root, the underground part of the mind. And everything we're doing in this world is propelled by our desires. In fact, the Vedas go so far, and this will, if you stay with this seminar, you're going to find this very interesting. The Vedic insight into use of technical terms, samasti, vyasti, which we can translate as macrocosm and microcosm. So what is happening in our own individual human consciousness is a microcosm of what is happening in the greater universe, the macrocosm. So the Vedas view this universe also as primarily being mind, cosmic mind. And again, to talk of the West catching up. So this is a point of view that is coming to vogue in the 20th century in quantum mechanics. I remember reading a statement by one British physicist, Sir James Jeans, and he's written in one of his books an often quoted sentence that according to quantum mechanics, the universe may be thought of more as a mind than a machine. And before quantum mechanics, of course, that was the time of classical mechanics of Newton. So Newton's example for the universe was a clock. Wind up, big old-fashioned wind-up clocks with the bells on the top. Whenever he talked about the universe, that was the image he would give of a clock. In other words, a machine. A machine wound up and it's ticking away, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. And there's so many gears turning together at different speeds. So the whole universe, he explained the planets revolving around the sun in that way, like a clock. So, and today also, I would imagine that many people still think in those terms. But actually, the cutting edge of modern science, the theoretical physics, is more inclined to see the universe as a mind. Because their studies lead them into realms of phenomena that the mind cannot be separated from. That's one of the big principles of quantum
Tämä on
mechanics.
yksi
That,
kvanttimekaniikan suuria periaatteita.
as you observe something, you change it. So the mind is also a factor. Whereas before, the mind was not considered at all an influence on anything. It was mechanics. It had to be physical. The mind was just a kind of neutral observer. Now the mind itself, the mind as a mind, has energy to interfere with phenomena, at least in the micro world, as it called it, at the atomic level. So this idea that the universe is a great mind, and that there is a symmetry between what goes on in our mind and in the universe, this is a very, very, you see, well-enshrined, well-established doctrine of the Vedas. So, as I say, you may find this very interesting. You stay with the seminar as we develop these themes. So, in this introduction, I just want to make a few basic points, which we will be developing. I've already made a few basic points. I'll make a few more now. So, one is that the essential substance of the mind, and I'm speaking of the material mind because there's also, as we will come to know, the spiritual mind. And in fact, the material mind and spiritual mind are ultimately the same thing. But what we call the material mind is a mind that has become, a good word is addicted to matter. It's the mind that is convinced that unless there is matter, then life cannot be. So it is a mind that is attached to this world. So this mind, although it is originally spiritual, is materialized in its association with matter, and therefore it takes on the symptoms of matter itself, and can be analyzed as a material element as it is in Bhagavad Gita. So we're talking of that mind, and that mind is essentially in the mode of goodness. Students of Bhagavad Gita will know that there are three modes of material nature: goodness, sattva, passion, rajas, and tamoguna, the mode of ignorance. So the mind, and this may be surprising to you, knowing our minds, the mind actually, in its essence, is in the mode of goodness. Now again, by association, the mind becomes contaminated, and then it can become very tamasic, ignorant, or very passionate, yes. But in its own, you see, if it can be separated from contaminants, then by itself, it will be in the mode of goodness. And as such, it is the energy of the Paramatma, of the Super Soul, the localized manifestation of God within our own body, within the heart. The mind is actually the energy of God, which He has placed at our disposal for our use in this world. So, when that sattvic or good mental substance is dedicated to the Lord, and I've just explained the Lord is the source of this energy. So if we dedicate our minds to Him, then this mind, which I've taken pains to explain, we're talking of the material mind, that material mind will be transformed. It will be transformed into God consciousness, into Krishna consciousness, which is a state of what we call pure goodness, to distinguish it from material goodness. Pure goodness, which is beyond the modes of material nature. This is the ideal unchanging goodness, beyond the changes of this material world. Our very mind can achieve that state if we dedicate it to the Lord. And this, in essence, is what yoga is all about. The word yoga, of course, this word refers to a number of different systems. But in essence, the word yoga, the root is yuj, which means to connect. So the essence of what yoga is all about is connecting the mind, the consciousness to God. And that's really the aim of all yoga systems. They go about it in different ways. Our system that we practice is bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. All yoga systems are aiming at that end from different angles of approach. So this is the essence, to dedicate the mind, to engage the mind in God. This is what makes one a yogi, when that mind is fully connected with God. And then you have the interesting coincidence that this becomes then a synonym for the word religion, because in its essential definition, religio from Latin, religio means to connect, just like in the English language you have words like ligament, which means the connecting tissue between two bones, like in our arm. We have these two major bone structures. The forearm and this is the forearm, and this is the upper arm. Forearm and upper arm. So these are connected here by what's called ligaments. It's a connecting tissue. So ligament is obviously rooted in the same ligio from Latin. So religio means to connect again. To connect again with God. So in this sense then, religion and yoga, they are synonyms if they're understood in their, let us say, most basic definitions. Of course one can add, so many layers of more recent understandings on top of that, but we're just talking about basic root definitions. So in other words, now we come to the point of the psychology of religion, shall we say, or the psychology of yoga. If we understand yoga, if we understand religion in this way, the relinking of mind and consciousness with God, then we're seeing that religion or yoga, they're essentially psychological systems. Essentially, that's what we're dealing with here. The laboratory is the mind. You see, the laboratory means the place of work, where you're really working in yoga or in religion is in the mind, the consciousness. And you're trying to set up some value system within the mind that will link that mind to God. Now in the Vedic tradition, of course, linking the mind to God goes way, way beyond mere faith, just believing in God. There are some religions which just go that far. All you can expect of the mind is just to believe in God. And then in that belief, you're good. There's so many mental processes and then emotional and behavioral things that follow that belief. But in the whole point of this, what I've explained to you, that the mind is the energy of Paramatma, the energy of Supersoul, is that you can actually meet God Himself on the plane of consciousness. And this is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. This, what is it? Jitatmana prasantasya paramatma samanivat. In this 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, for one who has conquered the mind, for one who has overcome all the obstacles that the mind presents to spiritual life, then one reaches, Krishna says, one reaches Paramatma Samangata, one reaches the Paramatma, the Super Soul, God. One attains Him. And this is where then we are faced with the spiritual mind. Just like presently, we have what we call the material mind. It's plugged into material senses. And within our mind, all these different perceptions of the senses, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we feel, they're all being given some order, some sense by the mind. Therefore the mind has been known in traditional philosophy as the common sense. It's the common sense. It's the inner sense that gives order to all of our sense perceptions. So this is the material mind. Our material mind is, what is it looking at? It's looking at Helsinki. Our material mind is perceiving Helsinki, wherever we go here, we're in the city. And this is the reference, some city in the north of Europe, here in the material world. But the spiritual mind has spiritual senses. Is receiving spiritual impressions. And in these impressions, they're forming an understanding, a perception within. And that is the perception of God Himself. So this is we can say is the summum bonum, the final goal of Vedic psychology. Actually to perceive God through purified mind and purified senses. So, how to dedicate the mind to the Lord? So, as I was explaining before, I mentioned about desires. That the mind is said to be of these three aspects of the subtle body: mind, intelligence, and false ego. The mind is most important. Why? Because the mind is the reservoir of desire. So when we speak of linking the mind to God, we're basically speaking of channeling the flow of our desires to God. Because the mind is the vehicle of desire. In fact, as we will see, the mind is controlled by desire. Desire is something finer and therefore more powerful than mind, because it's coming from the subconscious realm, which we don't have access to. We can't see where our desires come from. They're just welling up from somewhere deep within, and then they're there. And they've already taken over. You see, by the time you notice, your desires are already in charge. But the Vedas point out that there's a whole, there's in several stages. It's explained how desires pop up and how they grow and how they develop and how they reach that stage. So this is finer than our conscious awareness. So in order to purify the mind, spiritualize it, and make it a proper vehicle for knowing God, then our desires have to be engaged in God. We have to know how to channel our desires toward Him. That's a great science. This is really what the Vedic scriptures, the Vedantic literature, has to contribute to the human understanding of the mind and its workings. This very, very fine analysis of desires, where they begin, and how they can be channeled and purified. So this is what it means to purify the mind. So, taking all this together, then it's quite logical that the mind is originally spiritual. The mind is originally simply the pure consciousness of the soul. But the mind, as I said, has become material because our desires are now flowing towards matter. We see matter as the object of our desires. People think this is, in our Krishna consciousness movement, we have this phrase, material consciousness. What does it mean? It simply means the consciousness of believing or hoping that material things are going to satisfy me. That I have desires, and if I supply these desires with material objects, then I'll become happy. This is material consciousness. And spiritual consciousness simply means, it doesn't mean the absence of desires, no. That's not Bhagavad Gita teaching. But it means instead of our desire flowing to matter looking for satisfaction, they flow to God, they flow to Krishna, and they find their satisfaction there. And this requires purification. This is not, I have to introduce a big word of caution here. This is not some, snap formula solution. Someone's become very unhappy in their position in the material world, tried so many times to become happy through material enjoyment and failed, and then turns to the devotees and says, what shall I do? And the devotees say, oh, just think of Krishna, just surrender to Krishna. That is the answer. That is the answer. But it's not like that. That you just, we open the curtains, there's the deity of, oh, okay, all my desires are satisfied. Wonderful. And everyone here who practices Krishna consciousness knows that this is not what happens. Because our desire, I used the word before, addiction. And that's a very good word. Actually, that is the appropriate word. We have become involved in matter, not just in this one life, because our philosophy says we live many lives. So for many, many lives, countless lives, we have had matter as the object of our desire. We have become addicted to matter. So Vedic psychology is all about breaking this addiction, and that is not a good step. That's not just a mental decision. Like someone who's a heroin addict. He can't just one day decide, okay, that's it. I'm off this drug. No. It's very, very difficult. Generally they have to, they have to go through, they have to get professional help. They can be, their dependency on heroin can be cured to an extent, but like heroin addiction, alcoholism, these are very deep in people. Even when they give up that habit, there's still a weakness that persists, and they can fall back into the bad habit very easily. This is well understood. And this is our situation vis-a-vis matter. So one has to be very, very cautious about this. And this is why it's so important to understand the mind and how the mind works. This is why it's so important not to just dismiss the mind. It's all nonsense. This radio playing in my head, just turn the radio off and throw it out the window. No more problems. No, sorry. Because this self-same mind is also our laboratory in spiritual life. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written this wonderful song, Mama Mana Mandir, which means, translated from Bengali, my mandir, or temple of the mind. So he is describing their perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness, where the mind has become a temple of Krishna. And he's active, his mind is active, worshipping Krishna, loving Krishna. See, and this is the perfection. So it's not throwing the mind out. If you throw the mind out of the window, then are you going to have your temple of the mind? The mind's down in the alley now. You have to go and get it. So this is a very delicate process, and we need to therefore understand how this mind works. So then ultimately, when we're speaking of the material mind, we're talking about the condition of material attraction or material addiction. And that's what has to be broken. So there's actually a lot more I could say, even in terms of introduction. But all of this is going to come out in the days that come anyway, so
tulevat esille
I think it's enough
tulevina päivinä.
to pause here
Joten
and ask if you have any questions.
lopettaa tässä ja kysyä, että onko...
Yes?
Did I hear correctly that you said that there is connection in what is happening in individual and cosmic mind?
You heard correctly. Yes, there is. It's the concept of microcosm and macrocosm.
Puhutaan,
That
onko yhteys
what we are
henkilökohtaisen mielen ja
as
kosmisen mielen
beings with the mind, with the
mikrokosmoksesta ja
senses,
makrokosmoksesta.
is modeled on
olioina,
what the universe actually is.
olentoina, pienen ja
The
ruumiin,
universe
niin se on malli siitä,
is
mitä
also
maailma
a conscious being.
maailman kaikkeuskin on tietoinen olento.
And so there is a correlation, and we are relating with that universe,
Siinä on vastaavuussuhde. Me olemme suhteessa tuohon maailman kaikkeen,
cosmic being.
tuohon kosmiseen olentoon.
So this, I don't want to get too much into that now.
En halua uppoitua siihen.
That's for a later session to go into that in great detail. But it is certainly, yes, you heard correctly, that's a fact. That is a key principle to our understanding of this Vedic psychology.
Tämä on hyvin tärkeä periaate.
Any other questions?
Oliko muita kysymyksiä?
Yes?
Yes, I would just like to know, later on, are we going to talk, or are you going to talk more about how we can purify our desires?
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
That is essential.
Puhutteko myöhemmin siitä,
So
kuinka
in that regard, I'm not going to. I suppose you have been coming here. You know a little bit about what we do here. Okay. So in that regard, it's not that I'm going to be telling everyone something new in that, like I'm going to be revealing, oh, we have this secret 5,000-year-old formula for purifying the mind's desires, which you've never heard of before. It's not going to be like that. The devotees at least will have heard these things again and again, but I'm going to be explaining them, giving emphasis on the psychological aspect of these processes, to help you understand how the mind is purified by these methods of bhakti yoga, particularly the hearing and the chanting that we do with the Hare Krishna mantra. So this is not simply a ritual. You see, this is the problem that people have. I've explained religion as actually the process, like yoga, for purifying the mind. But the problem that people have when they look at religion, and often when they hear religion explained to them, is that they just see it as rituals, This is just something you do over and over again, or some vague type of credit, that you may not get until the next world or something. But this is why many people have turned away from religion, because they don't really appreciate what it can give them. So this is one of the things that I'm going to be trying to explain here. That, as I said in the beginning, the whole process of Krishna consciousness, we could say any religion, it could be understood totally in terms of psychology. If we take this word psychology, as I said, ultimately to mean the soul itself, it definitely can be understood in that way. So psychology, people are attracted to psychology because it's promising to teach you something about yourself, how you can help yourself, how you can bring changes to your life. Now this is what religion used to do for people. They sort of lost, the appreciation for religion in that sense. You see, so we're trying to bring that back here. That you can see how the process of Krishna consciousness, how it will help you, how it will bring about this change from material desires to spiritual desires, bring about this sense of fulfillment, which we're all anxious for in our life.
mitä kaikki kaipaamme elämässä.
Anything else?
Oliko muita kysymyksiä?
Yes.
You said religion is the reconnection with God. Why did we lose connection?
Why do we lose the connection?
Miksi
Yes.
menetimme yhteyden Jumalaan?
And that is because there is God and there is God's energy.
Koska on Jumala, olemassa Jumalan
And
energia.
this is another key point of our doctrine. Just like when we chant the Hare Krishna mantra,
Opissamme. Kun
so
laulamme
the
Hare Krishna,
word Hare, which we chant first, is addressing the energy of God, and then Krishna is the name of God.
viittaa Herran energiaan.
But this
Krishna on
addresses
Jumalan
God.
energia. Anteeksi,
So
Krishna
you
on Jumalan
understand
itse.
God or you approach God through His energy.
Jumala on lähestyä
Just like
hänen
the sun.
energiansa välityksellä.
How could you know the sun if there was no
Kuinka
sunshine?
aurinko voidaan ymmärtää ilman
Impossible.
auringon paistumista? Se olisi
In the
mahdollista.
absence of sunshine, there's no way
Ilman
the
auringon
form of the
paistumista.
sun could reach your eyes. So
Aurinko
you can only know the sun by way of the sun's energy.
Aurinko voidaan
So
saavuttaa
the same way,
auringon
you can only know
energian
God
joten
by the
Jumala
grace
voidaan
of His
tuntea
energy.
vain hänen energiansa armosta.
So we have lost our connection with
Olemme
God
menettäneet yhteytemme Jumalaan,
due to our wrong relationship with His energy.
koska suhteemme hänen energiansa.
The right relationship is to understand, as I just said, this is God's energy. Everything in this world is God's energy.
Jumalan energia.
Therefore, He is the Lord. Everyone uses this word, Lord. What does it mean? In the English language, Lord means one who has authority
Herra tarkoittaa jotakin,
over something at least.
jolla on
Like
vaikutusvaltaa, ainakin jo suhteessa johonkin.
English in Great Britain, the British aristocracy, there is this title, Lord.
On tää sana
There
lordi.
are persons who have this title. There's a House of Lords. There's a House of Commons and a House of Lords in the Parliament. The Lords are, aristocratic people. And they have authority over big estates or something, big fortunes. I don't know what.
Vaikutusvaltaa tällaisiin
So they're
isompiin
called lords because they have authority. So God is the supreme Lord because He has authority over everything.
Ja Jumala on korkein.
Everything is His energy.
Kaikki on hänen
But
energiansa.
honestly speaking, in this world, what we call the material world, people do not have that vision of this energy.
Ihmiset eivät
They
ymmärrä.
think it's my energy.
Se on hänen
Everyone
energiansa.
talks
Hän
about,
ajattelee, että se on minun
my life, my body, my world,
elämäni,
my country, my house, my car, my this, my that.
minun tämä.
In other words, they've assumed the role to some extent or other of being Lord.
Että he ovat tuo Herra.
And so what happens is that this energy instead, as soon as we adopt that position,
Ja heti
that
kun
I will control this energy, then this energy starts to work in a different way
Ja silloin tuo energia alkaa toimia eri tavalla.
Instead of revealing God,
Sen
it
sijaan,
obscures God. This is what we call Maya or illusion.
niin se peittää
You see? And this energy
harhaksi.
actually to teach us a greater lesson,
Ja tuo energia opettaa
this
meille
energy
suuremman opetuksen.
even seems to conform with our desires to some extent.
Näitä jopa sopeutuvat toiveisiin.
Even helps us imagine that
Se
we're
tauduttaa meitä
the
kuvittelemaan,
Lord of something or other. You
että
see?
hallitsemme jotakin.
But the problem is that it always turns out to be a cruel joke on us.
Sitten tulee aina semmoinen
Again,
varsin
We're forced to admit that we're not the Lord of anything,
että
not
joudumme
even this
lopulta
body.
myöntämään, että ei meillä minkään
We
Herraa.
assume like the body is fully under our control until we get that hammering pain in the heart, which is like the last thing we feel.
Koska tulee semmoinen
When the heart is
kivistä
not working anymore,
tuska sydämeen,
and it's
joka on
time
viimeinen
to
asia.
depart from this body. And then it's a little too late to
Sitä on
say,
myöhäistä.
it's a little too late to say, oh yeah, God, God. No, it's too late now.
Se on vielä myöhäistä.
That's why we're given a life. This is what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. We're given this human life to change our desires. Question. Actually, that's exactly what Krishna says. We have the duration of this human lifespan to change our desires from material to spiritual. And that's God's mercy. He gives us this lifespan. But if we don't use it, then at the time of death, we're still firmly in this Maya, this illusion of thinking I'm the Lord of everything. Then as that illusion is being shattered, it's too late. It's too late to suddenly become a very pure and holy person. Actually, it's not possible because of our attachments. What happens is that time of death for such a person is just a time of great fear. He's just seeing everything that he thought was his taken away from him. He becomes very fearful, and this is what leads him to his next birth, all this very strong attachment.
Nämä suuret ilmiöt.
Actually, God is just fulfilling our desire.
Jumala täyttää
Our
toiveet.
body is being taken away from us, and we're going, no, 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 no. I want to have a body. And God says, all right. That's what you want. Be born again. Take another one. See? Because we haven't learned to be detached. And at the time of death, it's too late. And that's also psychology. That's psychology. That's our psychology. All right, so I'll stop now. Thank you very much. And we'll continue tomorrow. Take these ideas further. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj ki jai.